Story Whopper 1. The Silencing of the Walcott House. In the fall of 1917, the Walcott family hosted what would be their final dinner in their three-story farmhouse outside Millersburg, Pennsylvania. Jonathan Walcott, a Civil War veteran, lived there with his wife Miriam and their two adult sons, Edward and Harris. On October 3rd, their mailman found the front gate open and the family dog tied to a post, barking into the woods. The house was silent. The table was still set, plates full, tea still warm. No sign of a struggle, no blood, just silence. Neighbors claimed they saw candles burning in the attic window until dawn. One even swore he saw Edward standing motionless on the roof, barefoot, staring at nothing. Over the next week, townsfolk began reporting strange echoes near the Walcott property, voices repeating their own words seconds after they spoke. Some swore they heard organ music, despite no piano or pipe organ ever being found inside the house. Inside Jonathan's desk was a note, unsigned, in shaking pencil. "We invited something to sit at our table, and it stayed." The Walcott family was never found. In 1935, two hikers passing the ruins found a trapdoor under a pile of burnt floorboards. Below was a single wooden chair and 4 empty teacups. In the corner, written in ash on the stone wall, "We're still eating." Story 2. The Whitlock Silence, based on true stories. In the spring of 1918, the Whitlock family estate sat at the edge of Deadwater Creek, a remote stretch of forest land in northeast Michigan. The house was large, 3 stories tall, and made of pale stone that always looked damp. There were 6 who lived there: Ezra Whitlock, his wife Lillian, their sons Michael and Sam, Ezra's brother Nathaniel, and a mute girl named Clara, whom they had adopted from a closed-down sanitarium in 1912. The Whitlocks were respected, quiet people. Old money. Never much trouble. But they didn't attend town gatherings. They didn't keep a phone. And most strange of all, they sent a sealed envelope by Horsafie, courier every Sunday to the local sheriff. No return address, no note inside, just a small square of linen torn from the same white cloth, always folded the same way. The sheriff eventually stopped opening them. On May 4th, the Whitlock courier never arrived. When 2 officers rode out to check, they found the front gates open and the house silent. Every door was locked from the inside. The livestock untouched. Firewood stack neatly piled. In the front room, the fireplace was still warm. Tea had been brewed. Coats still hung in the entryway. And yet not a single soul was inside. On the dining table was a single item, a blank telegram, untouched, with no address, and a set of 7 silver forks, all bent backward. Upstairs in Clara's room, written in soap on the mirror, were the words, "Tell it to be quiet." No fingerprints, no struggle, no bodies. Days turned into weeks. Volunteers came to help search the woods, and one of them, a young man from Wisconsin, wandered off from the group and was later found standing in a dry well behind the house, eyes wide, clothes soaked despite no rain. When they pulled him out, he said only one thing: "I found the room, but it didn't see me yet." The well was only 6 feet deep. There was nothing inside. In August, a traveling Baptist preacher from Tennessee arrived in Millersburg, claiming he had stayed with the Whitlocks in 1913. He said their house had a basement no one used, one not listed in the deed. He said there were nights when Ezra would go down there for hours, and the entire house would begin to hum, like a pipe organ pressed from under the earth. He recalled one evening when little Clara began to speak for the first time. Not just words, complete sentences. She described things that hadn't happened yet, places she'd never seen, people she didn't know. Her voice changed. She told the preacher, "They made me quiet so they could hear what's beneath." The preacher left the next morning. He never returned. Years passed. The house stood empty but never sold. Locals claimed to hear voices near the property. Not ghostly screams, but whispers, in perfect harmony, like a family speaking in unison behind the walls. In 1927, during a drought, Deadwater Creek dried up for 6 days. When it did, townsfolk discovered what appeared to be a stone tunnel mouth near the base of the Whitlock land. It went 40 feet underground and ended at a sealed wooden door. Carved into the frame were 7 symbols. Beneath them, scratched in by hand, we didn't dig deep enough to bury it. We only gave it room to listen. The door was never opened. In 1949, the house was finally demolished. Nothing was found beneath it. No basement, no tunnel, no signs of a struggle. But inside the walls of the master bedroom, behind the faded wallpaper, workers found something strange. 7 silver forks, bent, perfectly aligned, facing inward, and 1 small folded square of white linen. Story 3. The Hollow Tree at Barrow Hill. On July 9, 1919, 3 children walked into the woods behind Barrow Hill with a basket of bread, a dog, and a small red flag. 2 hours later, the flag was found. The dog was dead, and the children were never seen again. The Hartley family lived on a quiet estate at the southern edge of Connecticut. Ernest Hartley was a watchmaker. His wife, Florence, kept house and raised their 4 children, Elsie, Jack, Naomi, and George. They were known for being quiet, conservative, and punctual. The townspeople said Florence always hung their laundry at exactly 7:03 every morning, even in the winter. Their land stretched out toward Barrow Hill, a wooded patch that had once belonged to native tribes and later became the site of a failed mine. In 1908, a sinkhole swallowed part of the lower hillside. No one ever went near it again. In the summer of 1919, strange things began happening at the Hartley home. Their clocks, all of them, began to stop at the same time, 4:44. No matter how often Ernest repaired them, they froze again. And the chickens began laying perfectly spherical eggs, solid white with no yolk. They wouldn't break, not even when boiled. Neighbors reported seeing Florence walk the perimeter of her home at night, holding a red flag like a torch. Some claimed she was whispering names. Others swore she was speaking backward. On July 9th, she sent her 3 youngest children, Naomi, Jack, and George, into the woods to find the whistle tree. They never returned. When a search party followed the trail, they found the family dog, bones snapped, eyes still wet, lying beside a hollow tree. Inside the tree, a pile of clothing was found. Each child's outfit was folded, pressed, and damp. The red flag was impaled on a branch like it had been nailed by wind. What frightened the sheriff most wasn't what they found, but the soft, wet breath that came from inside the hollow, as if someone was exhaling slowly from within the bark. The town searched for a week. Florence Hartley never left her front porch again. Her husband never returned to work. They lit lanterns on the porch every night at exactly 4:44. When asked why, Florence only said, "They aren't gone. They've just gone in." By autumn, Ernest stopped speaking entirely. Florence began wearing her wedding veil day and night. In October, she vanished. Her shoes were found at the edge of the tree line, perfectly aligned, heels touching. Inside the house, on the wall above the kitchen stove, someone had carved the words, "Let the clock break open. That's where we'll wait." In 1922, the hollow tree was struck by lightning. It did not burn. It split. And inside was found a staircase. Stone, dry, ancient, leading down. What's at the bottom was never revealed. The state sealed the site. The remaining Hartley child, Elsie, never spoke publicly about her family. But in 1971, on her deathbed in a Boston hospice, she wrote one sentence: "There are places in the roots where the dead still breathe." Story 4. The Yellow Window at Bell Manor. In December 1916, the entire Bell family vanished from a house with 13 windows. But when police arrived, they only found 12. The Bell family were wealthy recluses who moved into a tall, narrow manor overlooking the town of Quiet Hollow, Vermont. The house was built in 1863 by shipbuilders who claimed it stood at a nautical angle, slanted ever so slightly to match the compass rather than the land. Some said the Bell house wasn't designed to sit still, only to point. Henry Bell, a retired architect, brought his wife Eleanor and their 4 children, Thomas, Gwen, Margaret, and little Henry Jr. The manor had no central hallway, just staircases that zigzagged across the house like ropes on a mast. Every door had 2 locks. Every bed faced north. But what disturbed neighbors most was the yellow window. On the 3rd floor, facing the woods, was a single round window made of yellow glass. It never frosted over. At night, even in pitch dark, it gave off a faint, golden glow. The townspeople called it the Eye. No one ever saw the Bells look through it, but Eleanor Bell was often seen standing in front of it for hours, unmoving, long after midnight. In the weeks before their disappearance, things grew strange. One of the Bell daughters, Margaret, began leaving poems in the mailboxes of strangers. The poems were written in old sailor's code, the kind used in sea burials. Another child, Thomas, refused to sleep indoors. He was found twice in the snow behind the manor, whispering to the yellow window. A local mailman claimed he delivered a letter to the Bells that read only, "The count is off. Seal the glass." On December 18th, neighbors noticed something strange. The Bells hadn't lit their fireplace in 3 nights. A group of men knocked. No answer. They broke the front door down. The house was untouched, warm. Plates were set on the table, coats on hooks. Music was playing softly from the upstairs gramophone. But there were no people. Not one. Even stranger, the yellow window was missing. On the 3rd floor wall, where it had always been, there was now only bare wood and a nailed-over hole. No broken glass, no debris, as if the window had never been there. And yet, a golden glow was still visible, faintly, from the inside wall, as if the light had stayed behind. Police noticed the furniture was arranged in precise angles, every chair, spoon, and drawer aligned to a compass bearing, and in the study was a map of the house, sketched by Henry Bell. It had 13 windows. But when police counted, there were only 12. No back door, no footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, just the quiet hum of wind through sealed shutters and the smell of burnt parchment near the attic. Inside Eleanor's diary was a final entry. "It's not the house that holds us. It's the 13th eye. When it opens, we answer." In 1922, the house was purchased by a Boston investor. The yellow window was never found. But workers who attempted to remodel the 3rd floor refused to work past sunset. They said the walls whispered when the lights went out. They said the measurements changed. One carpenter broke his tools and walked 12 miles back to town on foot, refusing to say what he saw. The house still stands, abandoned. And every winter, on the longest night of the year, a faint golden glow returns to the missing window's wall. Story 5. The Stone Baby of Holloway Creek. When Martha Calhoun gave birth in April of 1916, the midwife screamed, not because the child was dead, but because it was silent and made of stone. Holloway Creek was a forgotten little farming town buried deep in the hills of western North Carolina. It had no church, no school, and only one road in. The rest was surrounded by pines so thick they swallowed voices. The people there lived quiet lives. They raised tobacco. They buried their own dead. In the spring of 1916, Martha Calhoun, the preacher's wife, went into labor during a thunderstorm. Her husband rode out to fetch the midwife, who returned with a candle and a jug of hot water. But what she delivered that night wasn't a baby. It was a smooth, cold, human-shaped mass, gray as riverstone, heavy, with closed eyes and a perfect mouth. The midwife dropped it and ran. Martha never spoke again. They buried the thing in a pine box behind the church. By morning, the box was empty, and footprints, too small to be adult and too deep to be childlike, led back to the Calhoun porch. That's when the whispers started. First, just at night. Then from inside the walls. The townspeople thought Martha had gone mad. Her husband kept her hidden. But then, something strange happened. Other children began waking in the night, all claiming they heard a baby crying from under the floorboards. And some, like young Edwin, began repeating sentences in languages no one in Holloway Creek had ever spoken. Languages later identified as extinct Appalachian tribal dialects. Over the next 3 months, 5 graves in the Old Town Cemetery cracked open from beneath. Each headstone was found tilted. Inside every casket, dust, nothing more. And always, the same gray handprint on the lid. In July, someone placed a stone infant at the church steps. It had no eyes. But when Reverend Calhoun touched it, he wept. For hours. He said it spoke to him, not in sound, but in grief. He said, "It doesn't want worship. It wants memory. It wants what we forgot." That night, the church burned to the ground without a single flame touching a tree or grass nearby. Inside the ash, they found a carving in the stone foundation. "What is buried must be born." Martha Calhoun vanished that same evening. Her shawl was found floating in Holloway Creek. The water dark, warm, and still despite the coming frost. And for years after, hikers and wanderers who passed through the area reported seeing a small stone figure sitting in the creek bed, always facing upstream, always different in posture. Some said it hummed. In 1941, the land was sold. A logging company attempted to clear the forest but found their tools would not cut the pines near the creek. The wood simply turned the saws dull. The project was abandoned. Locals still avoid the bend where the Calhoun house once stood. Because some nights, just after heavy rain, the water runs dark gray. And if you listen carefully, you might hear it. Breathing. Subscribe for more interesting dark and mysterious stories.